Hello friends, and welcome to the 5th episode in our series, Selfishness in Our Marriages. We've been looking at the symptoms of selfishness and we've been going through them one by one. Today's symptom that we want to look at is competitiveness. You are too competitive. And I say too competitive because being competitive is not a bad thing. But being too competitive is dangerous and it can be a bad thing. In this case, because we are talking about marriages, it is you are competitive to the extent that you are competing with your very own spouse. Competitiveness sometimes can be tricky. You don't want to be outdone. You are competitive to the point of even being jealous when your spouse does something that you haven't done. We know of a couple who, one of them decided that they wanted to advance their studies and enrolled to do an MBA. And very quickly, the spouse said, I too must do an MBA. And so they both enrolled. And so they were both enrolling, they had both enrolled and they both wanted to do an MBA. And in the meantime, they had young children in the house. And the young children were now unattended to because you are going to class in the evening. You come home late after the children have slept. Both of you are doing that. And then in the morning you leave early because you have to go to work. You leave before your children have woken up. So you leave your children because you are both struggling to do the same thing. You leave your children in the hands of the domestic worker. That's the kind of competitiveness that we are dealing with here. When you are too competitive to a point that it is destructive to your relationship, it is destructive to the home. One of the things I mentioned was jealousy. I want to look at the effects of this being too competitive. One of them, we realize that jealousy is often a negative emotion. It can eat at the person who is experiencing it, to the point even of hatred. And when you get to that point, you begin to suppress your spouse's dreams and your spouse's ambitions. You begin to obstruct your spouse when they're trying to develop, forgetting, of course, that any development that comes about is for both of you. But now you want to suppress your spouse's ambitions, you want to suppress your spouse's dreams, and you want to suppress those things that your spouse wants to do. As a result, you become overprotective. You want to keep your spouse away from doing some of the things that they are aspiring to do. You become overprotective. And this often leads to the spouse beginning to despise you. Your spouse begins to despise you because you are not helping them, and in fact you are obstructing them in what they are trying to do. So it brings a situation where your spouse despises you. It also brings a situation where now you are not, as a husband and wife, managing your home well because you're too busy fighting against one another in terms of trying to get ahead of one another. So those are some of the effects in the marriage. So let's look at the cure. And the cure could be found in Ecclesiastes 4, verse 4. And this says, "Then I observed that most people are motivated to succeed because they envy their neighbors. But this too is meaningless, like chasing the wind. This is the New Living Translation. I like that version because it seems to capture what I'm trying to say here. And it says this too is meaningless. Some versions will say this is vanity, because these are the words of Solomon, and Solomon in some versions uses the word vanity. This too is vanity. It is like chasing the wind, especially in the marital home. When you are trying to catch the wind, it's unproductive. So we need to stop chasing the wind in our marriages. We need to stop trying to compete with one another and instead work together for the betterment of the home and for the betterment of the marriage. How do we do this? We do this by agreeing on what we need to do. Like the example I gave of studying. We can study in turns. It is possible to study in turns. One person can defer their studies so that they take care of things in the home, and then the other person completes, and then you come and study also. After all, you're doing this for one home. You're doing this together. You're doing this for the betterment of your home. We had seen earlier how the two of you are one. So you really do not need to be, in any case, in any situation, in competition with one another. True love rejoices when the other strives. In fact, the ideal situation should be an argument that is, who should do it first? Who should study first? No, you go first. No, let me go first. To a point where you toss a coin and decide who should go and study first. You thrive and you rejoice in the development of your spouse. Encourage one another to achieve the best that they can. In a marriage, you should be each other's number one cheerleader. Number one cheerleader. Let's encourage one another. Let's drive one another to be the best that we can, because after all, we are one. That wraps it up for today. Stay tuned for the next episode on selfishness and the symptoms and how they affect our marriages.